Micah Frankel. Welcome to Cage Minds Uncensored. There's so much to talk about today that honestly, there's really too much to talk about today. Last week, Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, a record 4 fighters getting contracts: Dwight Grant, Ryan Spann, Anthony Hernandez, Matt Sales, all get the contract offers from Dana White. You had Spann, Hernandez, and Sales all doing it with first round finishes. And I mean, Spann 26 seconds, Hernandez 40 seconds. Vicious stuff. Spann with the right hand leading to a guillotine choke finish. Hernandez, the right hands, the left hands, just totally putting out Jordan Wright's lights. This week, not getting the show up really early enough to talk about this week's Contender Series, as we're all going to see Valentina Shevchenko's little sister probably with an annihilation. Then there's a week off for International Fight Week of the Contender Series, but a lot of prominent prospects coming out of that show, and glad to see the two LFA champions, Ryan Spann, Anthony Hernandez, get their contracts. LFA has been the springboard for the UFC, and now with the Contender Series, they're making an extra hurdle, an extra hoop for some of these athletes to jump through, but these guys were able to measure up to the task and can't wait to see what they do with the big lights on. Pro Fighters League return. They're doing their events every other week. And again, more controversy coming out of this event in the Chicago area. You did have some dominant performances, though, in the prelims, like Brandon Halsey, the ground and pound, beating up Smolino Rama, causing cuts to get the stoppage early into the third round from the ref. Vinny Magalesh, his jiu-jitsu, as always, look incredibly on point. Rakeem Cleveland with some great striking. Controversy, you have the punt kick basically to the lower region by Robert Watley early in the second round. Thiago Tavares not able to continue. And in Illinois, a crazy rule of a TKO can be awarded. Watley gets the 5 points. And now we have a rule that definitely needs to be addressed and changed in Illinois, or it's just not safe to hold mixed martial arts events there, as long as a TKO foul can be misconstrued into a stoppage victory. You cannot be having events there. Sean O'Connell got out wrestled, looked bad in the first round against Honey Marks. Marks closing the distance in the second, looking for the finish, gets caught with a big left hand while exchanging, put down, and finish. That was a huge one from O'Connell. More controversy as Jason High is up 2-0 in the third round. He's caught in a guillotine. He looks to be searching for the wrist, but the ref, in an awkward move, calls it a submission. The commission says they're going to stand by their referee's decision. Jason Hyde screwed as he's submitted early in the third round by Efrain Escudero, according to the referee. Kayla Harrison, long-awaited mixed martial arts debut, lasts just over 3 minutes as she's able to take down. And have you heard this one before? A judo Olympian throws their opponent to the ground and takes her arm. Harrison with an impressive professional debut, 155-pound fighter. You wonder how creative Pro Fighters League is going to have to be in finding competition for Harrison. The co-main event, one of the better highlights of the night, the spinning back kick into a flying knee from Brian Foster takes out Ramsey Najim. And in the main event, Will Brooks, back to his old form, stays long with his striking, gets his wrestling going, grinds out Luis Firmino en route to the decision victory. The former Bellator champion getting reacquainted with the winning circle after what was obviously a dreadful stint in the UFC. Obviously a week off, and then July 5th, yes, you have some Pro Fighters League right before you kick off International Fight Week with the UFC. Friday night, we had Legacy Fighting Alliance, LFA, a bunch of crazy finishes. Greg Hardy showing, not Greg. We'll talk about Greg Hardy later. Jeremy Hardy showing off his wrestling, gets a ground and pound of Joel Moore. You had Itzvel Esquivel showing off some dynamic kicks. That axe kick, it partially lands, gets caught, but able to transition right into an armbar, submits Desiree Yanez early in the first round. Colton England with a full performance shows off wrestling, shows off power punching, and then some more wrestling in a decision victory. Cameron Graves with a great comeback victory over Jordan Titoni. It was a hard first round. Titoni went all out. Graves started to mount a comeback in the second round as the Titoni offense started to wane, and then into the third round, you can see the finish at Cage Minds MMA on the Instagram page. A plethora of punches and a slapping head kick. Cameron Graves with a great finish over Jordan Titoni. And in the main event, Brendan Allen, we also have this finish on the Instagram page with a counter check left hook right to the temple. One punch knockout of Larry Crow. Crow blitzed in, didn't return his hands to a good defensive position, ate the counter, and goes down officially 206. Brendan Allen, with that knockout victory, you got to figure puts himself back in the title contention. Even though he's already been there 2 times, he could have put himself right back in there with the LFA. Hernandez moves up the LFA middleweight champion with that offer from Dana White in the Contender Series. So that means Ian Heinrich is now the LFA champion. But I believe in week 6 or 7 of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, Heinrich is going to get his opportunity for a UFC contract. So essentially, that LFA middleweight title is just vacant at this moment. Talking about the UFC, a couple hours after that LFA event, after a quick nap, quite literally got like 4 hours in, the UFC was in Singapore, and we had some great finishes. Yuta Sasaki, that giant flyweight that he is, relentless wrestling, taking down Janelle Laus early on in the second round and finding the rear naked choke. Matt Snell returning home with a close split decision victory, handing Noke Inoue his first professional loss, souring his octagon debut. It came by split decision. I thought Inoue actually won the fight with his counter striking, but the judges saw it in Schnell's favor, not favoring the guy that actually landed more. A little bit of a strange one there. Jake Matthews, now 3-0 at 170 pounds, showed some great knees from the clinch, hurting Shinzo Anzai, getting the takedown, getting to that 3/4 mount, and Anzai gives up his back quickly. The rear naked choke is inserted. Matthews with the technical submission victory as Anzai went to sleep very quickly. Song Kenyon, some blistering right hands, starts Hector Aldon's debut. Shane Young destroys Alondo Dai with some heavy punches. You had Peter Yan hurting Teruto Ishihara, 3 straight KOs. It was a great consecutive amount of finishes, not to mention Song Yadong's right elbow in the clinch, dropping Felipe Arantes. Follow that one up some big punches. Jessica Ai showing how great her boxing can be, asserting herself at 125, taking the decision win from Jessica Rose Clark. Tyson Pedro in the co-main event hit Ovince St. Preux with some big kicks, a knockdown with the right hand, but then in being desperate to get the takedown after hurting OSP, and definite that he wanted to take the fight to the ground, Pedro ends up on bottom, and with OSP on top, that is a horrible place to be. OSP would then search for the Kimura, turn it into a straight armbar, and Pedro would be forced to tap before his elbow was snapped out of place. OSP, a big win, cementing himself in that top 10. A lot of people, including myself, thought that this was a huge opportunity for Pedro, and it felt like the momentum was building. But St. Preux able to weather the storm of the prospect and looking for another big fight. In the main event, we find out later that Donald Cowboy Cerrone was under the weather and had almost pulled out of the fight. Cowboy didn't look like himself, kind of stuck in second gear. Leon Edwards with his boxing, with some big body kicks, with elusive movement, being just the faster, more agile athlete, and then surprisingly being the bigger person was really stifling of Cowboy Cerrone's game. In all, Edwards takes the first round, the second round, and the fourth round. He took the third round off, in which Cerrone was able to land some leg kicks. In the fifth round, Cerrone is able to find his takedown that he'd been searching for the whole fight. 2 rounds to 3 rounds. Edwards against Cerrone. Some epic moments in the fight where right away Cerrone was looking for the takedown. Runs right into an Edwards knee as Edwards was trying to throw a kick. Knee connects to the eye. Cerrone's having to deal with blood down the right eye the entire fight. So, of course, nothing can be easy for Cowboy. Closing moments of the fight, Cowboy challenged Edwards to stand and trade in the middle of the ring, and they both pointed to the middle, and Edwards bounced backwards and around. Cowboy trying to in any way possible force that brawl, give himself the puncher's chance. Edwards, Darren Till, Cameron Usman, Colby Covington, the youth inflection in the octagon, in the welterweight division right now, it's amazing. You're thinking about the guys that they're taking out. You have Edwards getting the win over Cerrone, Till, even though it was controversial fashion, getting a victory over Thompson. Usman beats Maya. RDA loses to Colby Covington, and you have a welterweight division with a lot of new, young, fresh faces, not just recycling the same guys, putting the same guys constantly in big matchups, but you're seeing what win streaks, these guys are on 5-6 fight win streaks, what it's taken to get there and assert themselves into the upper echelon, and I'm excited about seeing these younger guys. Now, that's what we had this past weekend on the MMA scene, on the national scene. But for myself, we also had some boxing for all of us here locally. The New Mexico fight scene. We had Route to Glory 2, Bad Blood, New Mexico State title fights, a pair of them. Touch on this event real quick. Started off the night easily. Augustine Perez destroys Ernesto Hernandez. Now 2-0 for Perez. Hernandez dropping to 1-9. A plethora of cards, I believe 3 of them professionally coming up in August, and the Perez product hopes to be back in action rather quickly. Isaac Luna, in his professional debut, takes a unanimous decision from Brandon Trujillo, lands some big shots on Trujillo, testing the chin. The chin would stand up to all of them. The defensive awareness, the footwork, Luna would be able to slip shots, making Trujillo work. It was a long night. The 3 rounds of action looked like Trujillo was hurt badly in the 4th round. Luna unable to find the finish, but still gets his hand raised from the decision. Angel Perez improves to 3-0, defeating George Roybal, taking care of Roybal at a minute 54 of the 3rd round. It was a feeling out process of the 1st round, and in the 2nd and 3rd, you saw a blistering step-in, explosive straight right from Perez that would start hurting Roybal, a left uppercut that was there most of the night. The right uppercut would set up the flurry that would finish the fight. Angel Perez took on the toughest guy he's met as a professional so far, a tough George Roybal, a southpaw who was game to get in there, did put some leather on Angel Baby's face, but Perez weathered all of it, rose to the occasion, and takes another step towards great things as he's still an incredible prospect. Controversy comes through in Matthew Escobar versus Tavares Teague, as it seemed to be the early rounds were Escobar's. He was landing more shots, Teague was missing, but as you got into the 2nd or into the 3rd and 4th round, it was Teague landing some big right hands, putting Escobar on rubbery legs, and in the waning seconds of the 4th round, charging in, Escobar eats a right hand, a knee touches the ground, but the referee called it a slip, and I'm talking about 2-3 seconds left on the clock before the bell sounded. That non-call of what I felt was a knockdown cost Tavares Teague what would have been a decision victory. The judges unanimously see the first 2 rounds for Escobar, the second 2 rounds for Teague, and we end up with a draw. But that is controversial. The ref's call surely was a knockdown. Had people who were watching on the ProView Network stream texting me saying, how could they not call that a knockdown? It was definitely a knockdown. Hard pill to swallow. But one put on the spotlight during the event, Jordan Pettis said if both fighters were game, they would look to remake this one as soon as possible. We get up to the co-main event, and the bad blood may just linger on forever. Mad Max Heyman, Mad Mike Alderete fighting for the New Mexico State Cruiserweight title belt, fighting to end their trilogy, fighting to end this grudge. But that would not be, as the fight is a no contest. Alderete blitzed early. Heyman worked behind his jab to the waning seconds of the first round. Heyman hurts Alderete to the body. Doesn't get over aggressive. We make it out of the first round. In the second round, it looked like, again, a measured Heyman. Alderete charges in, pushing Heyman back. They get to the ropes. The ref's trying to break him up. Alderete is pushing Heyman nearly over the ropes. Then they both hit the ground, and you could immediately see Heyman in pain. I know a back injury when I see one. He had a back injury. The fight was waved off. A no contest, 47 seconds into the second round. Don't know if these two will ever get a chance to settle their issues. On to the main event, Josh Pitbull Torres, Christian Opuma Cabral, New Mexico State welterweight title fight. And I felt from the onset it was Torres asserting himself, establishing the dominance of the ring generalship, moving Cabral around. In the second round, you'd have a big knockdown scored by Torres. Cabral, though, shows a lot of heart, a lot of guts, pulls himself up off the canvas, and is able to continue fighting. This one was very entertaining. I was incredibly impressed by the defensive prowess and wizardry of the Pitbull Josh Torres, being able to disappear and deflect a lot of Cabral's shots. Cabral landed some great shots to the body, had Pitbull against the rope on a couple occasions, but Torres would be able to use his feet work, get out of trouble. We go all the way on to the 7th, where I really feel Torres was edging out each round. He was able to answer back in volume with everything that Cabral was throwing. 7th round, left hook to the body, delayed reaction. You could tell it was a good shot. Cabral is hurt, and this is when Torres opens up. Later on, the Cabral corner, I'd overhear them telling the kid, it would have been all right if you would have taken the second knockdown, if you would have taken a knee, taken a moment to breathe, recover, but instead trying to stay standing while being hurt, it just gave Torres the opportunity to open up more, and more. And with a final second, 2:59 of the 7th round, the fight is stopped, and Josh Pitbull Torres picks up the victory. The long-anticipated, much-waited-for fight lived up to the hype. Both guys stood in there. Both guys threw. They each had their moments. I felt like the experience. The war is not only in the gym, but in the ring. With the more experience, the higher level opponents that Torres had faced, it made the difference. And you could see a ton of potential, athletic ability, boxing ability from Cabral. There was just little bits missing. And it's the experience of one guy has 18 victories and the other one has 8. Of Josh Torres being in some of those high-level camps like Danny Garcia's, where Cabral has been working at Warriors Boxing and with only a few other professionals. It was an incredible display from both fighters, a lot of heart from Cabral, but Torres establishes himself in this 147-pound division as the number one guy, as was suspected. After the fight, both guys seem to make amends. That rivalry may be in the books. We may have the bad blood out of that one. But then you have the entertainment side of where Jose Luis Sanchez gets in the ring and calls out Josh Torres for a rematch. Now, Jose Luis is another talented prospect that we have here. 7-1 record, I believe. because he fought Torres after his second or third fight as a professional, his first loss. I know that he wants to get that win back. But Sanchez had been away from the scene for about a year now due to some personal issues. A little surprising to me that he would call out Torres, especially when you had the Etrisco boxing camp already calling out Torres when the Cabral Torres fight was being negotiated. You had the Maldonado Mendoza handlers, the Etrisco boxing people calling out Torres for each one of them. So Josh Torres has more than enough options. Jose Luis, like I said, is a great prospect, but Fidel is a bigger name. Brian Mendoza at this point is undefeated. Heck, you could do Mendoza versus Sanchez because neither one has fought in what feels like about a year. One having personal issues, the other one unable to secure a fight, just the boxing business. You also have Joe Gomez, who I had to look on Boxing Rec, returned to boxing after 3 years, in March getting a decision victory. He lost a split decision to Torres way back in the day and was able to stop Cabral's first career loss. So Gomez was there asking, how could Cabral and Torres be fighting for a New Mexico State title when I already beat one of them? Well, I think that goes to the fact that Gomez didn't get back in the scene until the Cabral-Torres fight was being negotiated. And also, let's not forget that whether it's UFC, whether it's boxing, whether it's Bellator, I'm learning this after 6 years. This is the fight business. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to have the two best guys in the ring to fight for a title. You need to have the two best guys to sell tickets, the two most famous guys, the two most popular guys to make a fight night work. Cabral and Torres made a fight night work. They gave a revamped energy to the New Mexico boxing community that was desperately needed. There are some entities out there that have continually been talking about that there wasn't enough excitement, there wasn't that it factor, that there wasn't this big fight atmosphere in our local combat sports community anymore. Definitely Pitbull versus Puma brought that back. You can see the pictures that I have on the Cage Minds Combat Sports News Facebook page from Franklin Romero, and also check out the Gomez Photo Works one from Sal Gomez's, and you'll see the rampant crowd that was going crazy during the fight. You can see it from these photos. We had the atmosphere. Legacy Boxing put on a big fight night. One other note, unfortunately, in a crazy circumstance, we did have a cancellation fight day. Danny Flores versus Jason Sanchez was canceled after the weigh-ins. They weighed in, they were both fine. Then when Rick Wright of the Journal was doing his write-up for the event, he went back to BoxRec, and that's when he noticed the Florida Athletic Commission had suspended Danny Flores from a knockout loss at the beginning of the month. Just like 3 weeks ago, from June 9th, Flores had actually taken a boxing match in Florida after signing to fight Sanchez here in New Mexico, loses that one, and is suspended. Something that I honestly didn't see on BoxRec 2 weeks ago when I was on the mic on Mike Adams' show, and we were breaking down the Flores-Sanchez fight. That suspension wasn't there. When I wrote the article about the fight being announced, that suspension wasn't there. So the commission had already approved the fight. They had no reason to go back and look at BoxRec. But thankfully, one reporter who was writing his article up at the last moment did go back to look at the fighters and were able to save a monumental mistake from being made. Flores trying to cheat the system, obviously, and I guess himself just trying to make more money, not worrying about his own health. These fighters are hard-headed, but that's why you have to have a commission. You have to have people reviewing this stuff for safety. You could have imagined the implications of tragedy that could have been had Flores still fought Sanchez, having just been knocked out recently. An unfortunate circumstance, really, for Jason Sanchez, selling tickets to people, telling everybody he's fighting, weighing in, getting all hyped up, rehydrating, and then finding out fight morning that you're not fighting. I know that his father was in a horrible mood. I could imagine. I don't know the financial aspects of how people were compensated, but just a horrible situation that thankfully didn't lead to a tragic situation. So from Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series to PFL, LFA, UFC, and here locally with Roots of Glory, it was one crazy busy weekend. All those results for the full events can be found at cageminds.com. As I said, not getting the show up early enough to talk about this week's Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. No PFL. They'll be back next week. We do have LFA Friday night in Phoenix, Arizona, Comerica Theater, and you have some familiar faces to the Southwest scene on that card, obviously being in Arizona. On the undercard, actually, on the prelims, a favorite that we had out here for a long time in New Mexico, Anthony Rosema. He's going to be in action, short notice replacement. You know, Rosema looks to land big, heavy strikes. We'll see how his ground game has improved being out there with Frankie Saenz in Arizona. Main card, second fight that I see on the main card, AJ Robb, who was a former Sparta Combat League flyweight amateur champion, taking on fellow undefeated Mario Batista. It's Rob coming in on 2 weeks' notice to face the 4-0, number 22 ranked in the Southwest prospect, Mario Batista. Undefeated lab prospect Keone Diggs takes on 10th Planet El Paso's Andy Varela. Varela was victorious with an inverted triangle in the main event of Southwest Brawl 7, which I was doing commentary for. Also a King of the Cage vet, very submission savvy, the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu product. Richard Palencia, Kevin Worth face off in a 130-pound matchup. Both are 5-0. I can tell you, Worth, a lot of movement in his karate-based striking. Joey Molina, Glenn Baker also on the main card. Casey Kenny versus UFC vet Roman Salazar is the co-main event, and for sure going to bring fireworks. The main event, Matthew Franco, who you know him as a combination stylist, very good with his weapons, underrated grappling, taking on another 10th Planet, but this one's from California product, Christian Aguilera, who I've had the chance to interview before. The guy has dynamite in his hands, a 3-fight win streak. All 3 victories have came in the calendar year of 2018. Won a fight in January, February, March. Seems to have tailed off now, only 3-0 in the year, having taken it easy the last couple months. Aguilera has 9 finishes, 8 knockouts. The one submission was due to strikes. Franco, 7, I believe, knockouts, if not, or 7 finishes, 5 knockouts. Excuse me for getting tongue-tied on that one. That's the main event in the LFA welterweight division. A ton of great prospects at 170 that they have coming up. Friday night, you also have Bellator on Paramount. We got some other Bellator news to talk about, but let's talk about this weekend's fight in Temecula, California. The women's flyweight title is on the line. Alejandra Lara, the Colombian, will be challenging Alimale McFarland, the Hawaiian who trains out of Team Hurricane Awesome in San Diego, who also won the EBI Women's Flyweight Tournament. Both women very versed in their submissions. Lara, I think, has the better striking that we've seen from her fights, but McFarland, the champion, keeps evolving so rapidly. That's going to be a great one. The co-main event, Ryan Couture faces Syed Awad. Awad, powerful hands, underrated jiu-jitsu. Couture likes to do a lot of his work from the clinch and then works on his submission game. Main card also has UFC WEC vet Robbie Peralta returning to the big stage, taking on former 4-division King of the Cage champion Juan Archuleta. Look for Archuleta's ground game to dominate. Christina Williams 2-0 as a pro, but those wins have been huge. Huge, talking about beating Emily Ducote, who was in that fight against Alimale McFarland to crown the first Bellator Women's Flyweight Champion. She's going to be taking on Valerie Letourneau, the former UFC vet. A great four-fight card there on Paramount. Also Friday night, 8-0 prospect in the light heavyweight division. Jordan Young is on the prelims. Not to mention Ed Ruth, Terrell Fortune, and Joey Davis. The Bellator wrestling products will be back in action. Also, Christy Lopez, who I've had the opportunity to talk to once before for Bellator, she's taking on Paola Ramirez. So a nice little prelim card there. You have Bellator on Friday night. Nationally, no action on Saturday, but there is a couple local cards here for the New Mexico fight scene. Buffalo Thunder Resort and Casino hosts Jackson's MMA Series 25. You're going to see top prospect Dan Argenta versus Jess Saunders. That one going to be an incredibly good one. Quentin Carmichael versus Jake Wilson. Another one to be spotlighting. The main card, Jesse Tafoya making his professional debut in a rematch from Jackson's MMA Series 15 on the amateur card. He'll be taking on Jorge Martinez. Martinez has won, I believe, 6 straight to close out his amateur career, 5 by knockout. That's going to be fireworks. You also have the co-main event, Josh Moreno, talented anti-wrestler, taking on Ryan Kelly, who's 7-2. Moreno looking to grab the attention of the LFA of the Contender Series, getting himself to hopefully 4-0. Also wanting to reach that same mark is Jess Martinez, the Vanilla Gorilla, who's taking on Henry Barahona in the main event. Barahona has not fought in a year and a half since losing to undefeated Spartan Combat League lightweight champion Justin J. Train Gonzalez. Barahona packs a pop in his punches, is very seasoned on the ground with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Martinez, been on the mats for an incredibly long time, an explosive, tremendous athlete who has been studying the Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu system for a long time, was also a Division III college wrestler up there representing Santa Fe and Latrell Yee. So a huge night up there at Buffalo Thunder. You'll have Franklin Romero and Sal Gomez out there covering for CageMinds.com. Look forward to that coverage and those pictures. Myself, I'm going to head down to Las Cruces, dragging my nephew along with me to help me go do coverage of American Fight League's Southwest Brawl 8. I believe that we're going to be streaming the event, commentary from yours truly, on the Cage Minds Combat Sports News Facebook page. Steven Ortega versus Danny Grado, who I had the chance to talk to last night. That interview up at CageMinds.com is our 180-pound main event, co-main event in the middleweight division. Rugged, always ready to rumble, Wreck-It Randy McCarty, who splits his time between boxing and MMA, taking on Bellator King of the Cage vet Chris Leyva. Brian Castillo, who I've seen with some really good boxing skills up at Buffalo Thunder, under the Holmes boxing card, taking on Paco Castillo. Juan Gandara looks to continue his winning ways against Xavier Estrada. On the amateur side of the card, expected to have 2 amateur title fights. I'm not sure if that's still going to happen. James Pleasant meets Richard Jennings in the first one at 145 pounds. Up in the air, as far as I know, is the 135-pound amateur title bout, as Ricky Maynez was going to face off with Caleb Ramirez, but as I understand it, Ramirez is injured. Not sure if there has been an opponent found for Maynez, who also at Southwest Brawl 7 was expected to fight for this title, but an opponent was unable to be found. Talk to Sterling Peak. You can find that interview, the video, at the Facebook page. He's taking on CJ Boston in what's going to be an exciting, brawling middleweight contest. Had talked to Dakota Monroe and Ray Viza about their featherweight encounter, but Viza, in a freak accident, breaks his hand. It's up in the air if Monroe will still be in action this weekend. Anthony Navarez versus John Calderon at 125 pounds, and Emmanuel Berkman versus Ivan Rios, also at 125 pounds, are both fights that I would highlight that could be something special. So keep up with Cage Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook this weekend for all the details of Southwest Brawl 8 taking place there at the Las Cruces Convention Center if you're able to join us live. Or like I said, if you're in the northern part of the state, you have the Jackson's MMA Series 25 at Buffalo Thunder. Bellator had been quiet for a little bit, but I said that we got Bellator news. They had been quiet, but they thought it was time to make noise again. The UFC had been stealing a lot of headlines, especially with the deal being announced about ESPN and how that was changing everything. ESPN Plus, Ariel and the Bad Guy, all this new stuff changing the MMA world, but Bellator hadn't made any news. Well, and even One Championship had made news. Their new free app, you can download, watch all of their events live and free. But Bellator needed to make news. Bellator likes making splashes with free agents. They've picked up some young, incredible prospects that I can't wait to see in action. But those guys don't make big headlines. Timothy Johnson, even a UFC vet, didn't make headlines. But what does make headlines is that Scott Coker got Lyoto Machida to agree to come on over to Bellator. Now, most of us would assume that the UFC didn't want to pay the bottom line. They didn't like the numbers. They just let Machida go. In fact, the UFC matched the offer that Bellator made for Machida, but Machida had already given his word to Scott Coker that he would come on over. I guess to some people, your word is your bond still. It's a little bit crazy to hear that in combat sports, hear that in MMA, but Machida has jumped on over to Bellator because he told Scott Coker he would. That's one big announcement. Another big announcement is that Bellator will be putting Gegard Mousasi against Rory MacDonald. Not that they don't have a stacked welterweight division. I'm sure you could find somebody that MacDonald hasn't fought with his whopping 2 fights in Bellator. Not to mention, as far as I knew, John Salter versus Rafael Lovato Jr. was the middleweight number 1 contender bout, but then Salter got injured, so I guess Buck Lovato Jr., even though he destroyed Gerald Harris, Machida's coming on over. Well, I guess this makes sense for Bellator because Machida did beat Mousasi. He has beaten Bader. Bader may be your light heavyweight and heavyweight champion. I guess bringing a guy over that beat them does make sense. It does make it more competitive. And you are Bellator. You are starving for ratings all the time. Machida is a well-known name. And you could probably buy that Joe Rogan screaming, "It's the Machida error." That was back in the Spike heyday. Paramount could use that footage. So another big splash. You bring over Lyoto Machida. Now, you've had the Mousasi MacDonald fight announced. That's a big fight. I still feel it's a little weird because MacDonald's talked about going up to 85. Mousasi would never go down to 70. He's been at 205 and been a champion for Strikeforce before. He's a big 85er. I feel Mousasi has a huge advantage in this fight. But what do you do with the welterweight division? We're going to create a Grand Prix. Huh? It's a little weird to do a Grand Prix when, it's the ultimate number 1 contenders tournament, I guess, because MacDonald's going to go mess with Mousasi for a while. Interesting to see how Bellator plays out. They do have some names to add in there. Names that have already been floated around were Paul Daly, Michael Venom Page, Andrei Korshakov, Douglas Lehman. Let's not forget they do have Lorenz Larkin that they're paying a lot of money to. And John Fitch just debuted and wrecked Paul Daly, so he obviously has to be in there. So that's 6 names. It'd be interesting to see where they go for the other 2. Do some of their prospects get fed to the Sharks finally and tested? I wouldn't hold my breath on that. They'll bring in 2 more seasoned fighters that we know, but look for a quotation marks in the air welterweight Grand Prix coming soon from Bellator MMA, which again I feel will be the ultimate number 1 contenders tournament. And the first leg of that tournament will kick off September 29th. Okay, cool. So we're going to get this first semifinal of the welterweight Grand Prix. We're going to get this middleweight title fight with Mousasi and MacDonald. And you got to throw in legends because that's what Bellator does. We're going to get the 4th installment, this time at heavyweight, between Rampage and Vanderlei Silva. The guy that's crazy and the guy that could care less by now, and it really has felt like a money grab the last 2 times out from Rampage. I guess Rampage won't have to wrestle. They're going to go out there to knock each other out. Bellator making Bellator kind of moves. I mean, this will do great ratings on Paramount Network. You're getting some big names on there, and that's what they needed. It's what Bellator wants. You have to compete with the UFC. You're owned by Paramount. You're owned by Viacom, and you're on the Paramount Network. You're a TV product. That's how you have to push yourself. Oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself because they made another announcement today. DAZN, as how you pronounce it, DAZN, but DAZN is what Ariel Helwani said it's pronounced, and Bellator have announced a streaming rights deal. Bellator, instead of doing tape delays, because it's not like Paramount is owned by Viacom, which owns Bellator, and it's not like CEOs can tell people to move stuff around. We can't go live on TV. We must rerun episodes of Cops or Roseanne, which I'm sure was taken off by now. But we will solve the problem of live streaming by we're going to do what everybody else is doing. Because that's Bellator following, not leading. They have partnered up with DAZN because Viacom can't give them enough money. Now this deal will give them money to compete with the UFC as you guys keep picking up free agents. Really weird stuff I'm saying. But this big landmark event from Bellator will be on this app. They have not announced, DAZN, how much this app will cost you in America. But this will be the launch. September 29th, this Bellator event will be the launch of the app. It's launching here in the United States and several other countries. I guess these people had the rights to the NFL package in Canada, which didn't fully work out for them. Some of the rights are going back to cable networks, but that's where they started, and now they're branching into the MMA industry. They're going to financially help Bellator. We don't know what it's going to cost, but they are offering a free month trial where this Bellator September 29th event will take place. So you'll get all of September to try out this app, and you'll get the last day to see the MMA event. Maybe you could try to just jump on at the end of the month and see if you can extend your free trial. But now Bellator trying to help thin everybody's wallets. You already, if you're a fan of Access TV, you're on one of the upper packages for DirecTV. You're already thinking to yourself, how am I going to afford $4.99 a month more for ESPN Plus now that the UFC has made their deal for a ton of events to be shown on that streaming service? Bellator, owned by Viacom, a Paramount product, a TV-based show, because of tape delays. Let's be honest, because it's a good ability for them to make money, and they see charging people as a money maker, Bellator will not go to pay-per-view, it seems like, but they're going to go to a streaming service that is yet to announce a price plan. So you can look at it positively. At least you can watch Wanderlei Rampage 4, Musasi McDonald middleweight title fight, and whatever this first quarterfinal of the Bellator Welterweight Grand Prix for free. But going forward, MMA fans, it looks like financially you're going to have some big choices to make. The UFC and Bellator, again, forcing your wallet wide open, forcing to see how much you can pay. And I think it could also just backfire on them. Maybe you do pay for the apps, and maybe you just don't waste the money to ever go to a live event again. Let's be honest. The cameras get better angles than what we get seating anyway. Sorry to say it. Love covering the events live. But if you're going to be charging us so much money continually on a monthly basis to watch all the fights, why not just watch all the fights and take away that live market? This is why live attendance is down across sports. When you're charging us and you're forcing us to pay so much more, and you're forcing the consumer into fiscally worrying so much which way they're spending their money, it'd be easier, I guess, just to not go and enjoy any of these events live. Or if you do, you're really not going to be watching many of them throughout the year because of the cost of that live ticket. Bellator with an interesting move today, but they're obviously a business. They're trying to make money. They're trying to bring in bigger fighters. DAZN and Paramount fully believe or DAZN and Viacom fully believe in what Scott Coker is doing and how he's going to lead their product. I'm interested to see how this works out, and to be honest, just can't wait till the price plan comes out, which supposedly is about a month away. Hopefully in July, August, they will let us know, but in September is when this new streaming service launches, and I'm just sitting here scratching my head. Bellator making Bellator kind of moves. The UFC had a great weekend, and this weekend they're actually taking the weekend off to gear up for International Fight Week. So look forward to it next week. We got the tough finale. You got UFC 226. The super fights are coming up. We'll be talking about that next week. Thank you, Mac10, for the support. Everybody on Facebook, check them out. MMACK10. Go over the ProView Network's YouTube page and check out Root to Glory 2, Bad Blood. If you haven't yet, the New Mexico boxing scene definitely becoming exciting. If you haven't, I must implore you, go check out that Cabral-Torres fight. It was a war for 7 rounds. Interesting stuff. Thank you guys for listening this week. Have a good one.